And I'm certainly very proud to be part of a government that is putting attendance front and centre of education policy, which it frankly hasn't been for several years. And one of the results of that is that New Zealand's attendance is not only bad compared with where we were just a few years ago, it's bad compared with just about any country we'd like to compare ourselves with. New Zealand is becoming an outlier on school attendance for all of the wrong reasons. And one of the results of that, as the Prime Minister's just said, is that it's going to affect New Zealand's performance and the lives that people lead for over 80 years, because that's how long kids that we've just seen today will be participating in New Zealand life well into next century. In short, it is not easy to learn at school, but it's impossible to learn if you're not at school, and that's why the government is committed to getting kids back to school regularly, with a target of 80% of kids attending regularly by the end of the decade. However, we're here today to announce a series of initiatives Cabinet's agreed on that will start much sooner than that, in fact, for term 2, which begins in only a few weeks. The first is that we're going to see much better data, and from the start of next term, the Ministry of Education will go from reporting data once a term, and often several months after the term ended, to reporting at the end of each week what the daily attendance rates were for that year. And the objective here is to create a national focus in much the same way that the previous government created a focus on various COVID-19 statistics. We believe that educational attendance is now a crisis with similar long-term effects for New Zealand, and so data will drive the emphasis on attendance with weekly releases of daily data for the previous week. We'll also see a public education campaign around the importance of attendance. This is going to be locally delivered but nationally coordinated. A few weeks ago I was in Hawke's Bay and saw some of this content being generated, and you can picture, for example, items on TikTok and Instagram which show local sports heroes explaining what education had done for them, reaching out for people in that region, saying this is why education is important. You'll also see before the start of next term new public health guidance. There's been a lot of questions around this, but the simple truth is that for too long we put public health at the centre of nearly everything, and while that is certainly important, we've seen the emphasis placed on education fall down the totem pole of national priorities, and education needs to be back up there. So you'll see that prepared primarily by the Ministry of Health, but something on a par with what they have in the UK, where they give parents a clear decision tree of, if your kid has this symptom, you need to either keep them home from school, see a doctor or get more information, or in some cases it may actually be acceptable to go to school. Not every ailment means that you should not attend school. What parents need is clear information from the government to help them make that kind of decision. In the longer term, we will see a number of initiatives that are more detailed. They relate to making sure we get the best value out of attendance services, that we set priorities for school boards, that we take the attendance strategies that are working at some schools I've visited recently and make those a template for every school in the country. You'll also see a traffic light system introduced where kids who are attending regularly are green. Kids who have some attendance issues are orange to be dealt with by the school, and those who have persistent non-attendance are deemed red to be dealt with by the Ministry of Education. There's been a huge amount of emphasis and coverage of this issue in recent weeks on the place of fines in government policy. I can understand why there's a lot of emphasis, because it's something that certainly generates discussion, but I think it needs to be placed in the context of a wider range of initiatives the government's taking, and that apply if you end up in a red traffic light situation, having had multiple attempts to get you to comply and go to school, and a judgment by those involved that it's not a case of can't, but actually a matter of won't. That is the circumstance in this wider policy environment where fines become relevant. The third part of this initiative is even further out than this year. It involves understanding how it's become possible that while the government provides literally billions of dollars of free education each year, a lot of people have decided the value is not there and they've deprioritised going to school. For example, the Education Review Office in a recent review found that almost 3/4 of parents are comfortable with their child missing 1 week a term, or 10% of their school. Now, we need to better understand and equip people with the reasons to go to school and actually feel that they're getting value. And there's been a lot of reporting and speculation around misbehaviour in the classroom, the value of the curriculum, and what's being taught, bullying and mental health concerns. I don't think any government has taken the time to properly understand that and understand why education is not being valued as much as most people would hope by so many parents, and actually meet in the middle and find a way to make education viewed as valuable and relevant again. So that is our basic direction, but obviously there'll be more questions, and we're really happy to take them.
Happy to take your questions.
Well, just bear in mind that the traffic light part fits into phase 2. What we're announcing today is the immediate stuff. So in terms of how it would work, we envisage it would be student-based and therefore family-based. Obviously, if a particular school had a lot of students who were deemed to be red light, then in that instance I think you'd be asking, is there something that needs to be done at the school level? But also just hasten to emphasise that the Cabinet hasn't actually agreed on the exact details of that part of the policy. It has agreed with a paper I've taken that signals what our overall direction, the immediate things we're announcing today, the things that we'll do for the rest of this year, and the things we'll do over the rest of the parliamentary term to solve those deeper problems. Well, it's going to be both. I mean, I think what's important to understand, there's so many reasons why people aren't attending. Some parents aren't sending their kids to school because they have no money and they're sending their kids out to work. Others are not sending their kids to school because they do have enough money, but they wanted to get a cheaper airfare to Fiji in the last week of term. Now, obviously, in those two cases, there's going to be a different approach from the government. Finding someone with no money probably is not going to make the boat go faster, but if it's more a case of won't than can't, and somebody just doesn't want to live up to the expectation in law that you should send your kid to school whenever possible, that's when a fine is potentially the right thing to do. But you'll notice in this whole discussion, it's quite a few steps down the track. The way that we're always very mindful that everyone who works in New Zealand education has absolutely had it up to here with more compliance burden being put on them by the government of the day. So that's front of mind. The second thing I would say is that we will be putting directives on boards of trustees to make attendance a priority, just as we have for the Ministry of Education. It's astonishing the previous government did not do that. However, we'll also be learning from some of the more effective schools. For example, in the last few weeks I've visited Glen Innes School in Auckland. You may know I visited Freiburg High, which actually is doing an excellent job on attendance. We'll be looking, absolutely, Manurewa Intermediate, it's a superb example, and we'll be looking to take the learnings from those schools and say, look, here's a template of what effective boards of trustees can do, and we would like to see all schools rolling out these kinds of strategies. And if I was to put it in a nutshell what they do, they usually have a very good person internally, a good relation with an external attendance officer. They usually have good connections with charities who help solve some of the more resource-oriented problems that people have, and they'll usually have a good relationship with the local youth aid police, and they use all of those people that have slightly different perspectives and information to get kids back to school. Now, obviously it's going to vary with different communities, but we'd like to see more of that rolled out. Actually, what has been allowed by the previous government for attendance services, if you take the Regional Response Fund and also the attendance service, adds up to about $48 million. So we'll see that amount of money annually. We don't believe that we need more money. What we do believe is that we need to ask about the effectiveness of some of that spending. What I'm saying is that $48 million is a pretty considerable spend on attendance. The question is who directs it and who checks that we're getting performance in return for it. I don't think the previous government was very clear on that. What we're going to be doing in some of those phase 2 things for the rest of this year is asking, well, what do those strategies look like at your Manurewa Intermediates, at your GI school, at your Freiburg High? And I'd have to say that local control is really important in those initiatives. So we'll be looking at not how do we spend more money, but how do we use the money we're spending to get better results. First of all, we know that 80% is possible. New Zealand has been in the 70s for regular attendance in the past. We also believe 80% is absolutely necessary if New Zealand's going to solve its long-term problems of having a more cohesive, happier, productive society that can afford the lifestyle that New Zealanders want. How do you get there? Well, actually, I don't think the previous government has had a firm strategy to do that. We do, and we're starting to announce some of those initiatives already. Others will take more work. The other thing that I'll be doing in the coming months is setting out the strategy of how we realistically think we can get there quarter by quarter and year by year. There'll be some students where it's relatively easy. The reasons they're not attending can be easily solved, and that's good. There will be other students that have formed a habit of non-attendance early in their primary school years, and getting them back to regular attendance is going to take several years, just as we prevent new students from forming that habit. So once you break it down, in order to have a goal, you've got to have a strategy to get there, and that means understanding the different reasons why kids aren't attending, and then having a tactic to actually overcome those reasons. So you will see those waypoints, but we didn't hesitate to set the goal because 80 is where we need to be, and we know that it's possible in that time frame.